Welcome, everyone. I am Enrique Acosta Gonzales, and I am joined by Ashkan Tashvir. And in this episode, we will be speaking about the role of empathy and compassion in leadership. Ashkan, these are two things that are very near and dear to my heart in terms of leadership, and I can't wait to get into this conversation.
Hello, Enrique. Thank you. Um, yeah, so I'm quite glad to be here in doing the next episode. And as you've mentioned, compassion is quite dear to heart. But so to create a context for the session, and then we can take it from there. Often when we talk about characteristics or qualities, aspects of being, such as compassion, Um, often, particularly in the workplace, these qualities, compassion, let's say, is being seen as soft traits. That's literally the word, the terms that um, has been used a couple of times during the time that I was working with different leaders in different organizations. For example, they're dealing with employee retention in their sales team, and when you look into the dynamic of the team, and then you bring this conversation on with the executives that you see, like your team is not compassionate. There's not much amount of care and bonding and all that. Um, the immediate response is, well, I'm not talking about. We're not discussing my intimate relationship with my wife or spouse. Well, that's exactly where the blind spot is. So that's exactly where the problem reside. Compassion is not just a kind of altruistic approach towards someone's pain just for the sake of your general benevolent care for another human being. Now, I'm not saying that's not important, but there's more. There's more tangible conversations we can have around compassion. Yeah. So compassion is when you're compelled to intervene when you see someone is in pain or dealing with severe problem, let's say. The reality is the people in our teams are human beings. As obvious that as it sounds, but it's important to bring it up and then pay quite good amount of attention to it. See, we're not using robots. We're not using machinery. We are working with human beings. That means that there's this fallacy that yeah, so we are rational beings. Well, we are capable of rationality. There's no doubt in it. But we are also emotional beings. We are beings that like we go through sorrow, we go through grief, we go through anxieties, we go through fear, doubt, and so many other things, boredom. Yeah. So we have all of these things that we need to deal with. Now, the assumption is if you are a professional and you're putting this professional mask on your face, therefore you need to be immune to all of these things that are just listed. Yeah. And that's really not the way it is. Yeah. We are rational being at the same time, we are emotional beings. And no matter how much you're trying to pretend that 100% you want to be professional, in reality, your personal affairs, if you've been fighting with your partner at home, if your children are suffering from some illness or something that it's concerning your mind, and many many other things, financial problems, and so on, they're going to get in the way of a person being able to perform, no matter how technically competent are going to be in their field. Yeah, you can have the best computer programmer, you can have the best salesperson technically, but if they are being impacted by um, like human related problems, as we listed, they're not going to be able to perform. And whether you like it or not, and as an executive, as a leader, um, your uh, business, your organization, your team, your deliverables are going to be impacted. Now, what to do with that? So you tell me, Enrique, what is the normal or typical response that some companies, some organizations may have when it comes to um, these situations?
Yeah, well, most corporations really loathe the words empathy and compassion. They see them as a sort of weakness that has no place in the workplace.
Mm,
And it's often the driving factor of why high turnover is, why people are feeling overwhelmed, why people
mm,
feel like they need to leave those establishments. And it's because of what you mentioned earlier, them being categorized as something soft that is really not helping
mm,
business, right? But I think that's
yeah,
where the main misconception and misunderstanding of
yeah.
these two words really come from, and which I wanted to ask you, with all that misunderstanding, with all the misrepresentation of these two particular words, empathy and compassion, how would you define them?
Oh, I mean, so um, so some of our audience would be familiar with the being discourse, the being framework, and we have this ontological model in which we have the different distinctions. I wouldn't call them definitions, but distinctions of various different qualities. I can actually read the distinction compassion, instead of trying to explain it. So I mean, yeah. So compassion is the quality that compels you to intervene when someone is in pain or suffering and is a clear manifestation and demonstration of your care for others and humanity. It is the capacity to be with the suffering of another. Compassion is not sympathy or pity, and is also beyond a feeling of empathy for another who is suffering as it moves and motivates you to support them, irrespective of your own discomfort or concern. So, see, definitely we're not talking about sympathy, like you don't, no one likes you to feel sorry for them in a sense, so we're not talking about that, but we're talking about empathy and compassion. Now, the way that I distinguish compassion is with empathy, you feel for the other person, and but normally you stop there, yeah. But compassion is when you are compelled, as the distinction was um, emphasizing. So you're compelled to make a move. You want to intervene. You want to see. There's a level of responsibility and autonomy in it. Yeah, you want to act upon what you feel. Now, yeah. So that's basically how I would create the distinction there. Yeah. So, but let's make the conversation a bit more practical. Yeah. So we created the context that human beings are not resources, and we often call them human resources. It is the work done by human being that can be considered as economic resource, but not the human being itself. And that's a kind of a fallacy. That's where we often get lost. We collapse when it comes to that. And that's a very, very important distinction. So the human being is not the resource, but the work being done by human being is the resource. So as an organization, you want the work being done. There's no doubt in that. But you're not going to have the work being done unless you care enough about the human beings involved that are going to basically deliver that work. So that's exactly where compassion sits. So I hope that by now, like we had managed to briefly create the context so that if whoever's listening to this conversation or watching us, if there are amongst the people that I would simply categorize compassion as this soft trait that is not worthy of really paying attention in a serious leadership conversation, I hope that now they are more receptive to this conversation. Yeah. Now, so, but then you may say, okay, now I feel for this person. This person is troubled, like is dealing with the problems they're dealing with, yeah. And how does it look to actually be compassionate in action in a practical sense? Yeah, what would you say? What comes to your mind, Enrique, when it comes to that?
Well, in terms of leadership, if you are wanting to be practical
Yeah,
within the schemes of empathy and compassion, you want to be a good
yeah,
listener. You know, you
okay,
want to
yeah,
give the workers, the team members, the feeling of I'm being heard. And not only am I being heard, but I'm also being considered. My feelings and my thoughts and my aspirations in this workforce, and that really
mm,
does make a difference.
yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. So one of them is like active listening and be making yourself present to that person, and being in acknowledgement. You know that's a very important thing. So sometimes people don't actually want us as leaders to do much. They just want us to acknowledge. Yeah, see, for example, the person is going through lots of things, yet they are doing their best to make the deliverables happen. You know, like to do the tasks at work. Just I think that if a person is going through personal crisis and everything, they already have enough on their shoulders, and there's just this relief that, see, you know, like we know this thing is happening to you, and and we acknowledge that, and that on itself, it may not sound much, but it's much. Yeah. And most people quite appreciate that, to know that they are being supported just by acknowledgement in their workplace as they're going through their personal crisis. Yeah, it can be like they're going through divorce, they're going through different illnesses or medical situations in, you know, so obviously like in the modern world, in different parts of the world, like when it comes to m- medical problems or things like that, there are laws in place like fair work, etc., that like the organizations are obligated to. But see, that's the last resort. You want to build a different kind of relationship with your core team, at least, you know, when it comes to being compassionate and being in acknowledgement of their suffering and pain as they are going through it. Yeah. So that acknowledgement is a big one. Yeah. Another one would be um um like this whole conversation about inclusive leadership. Yeah. Now this is not just more about like something, some crisis or something that is happening temporarily to a person. This is more fundamental. Yeah. This is something that there are different people in your organization that, due to their circumstances, due to their mental health, due to the fact that they may come from certain groups that they don't have the conventional comfort that certain other groups in the society may have. Yeah. Now, I mean, you know, these conversations around inclusion and diversity, it's a big one these days. Now, I know that some take it quite out of context, and unfortunately, it has turned into this kind of a tokenism, yeah. And you see a level of inauthenticity around that in organizations. But there is a genuine part to it that you want to actually have that, take that into consideration. See, for example, if you have people in your organization that they are um, the main carers of children, so you want to take that into consideration that this is a thing about those individuals, yeah. So and then trying to work with them so that you can schedule their work, you know, so that they can take care. Or for example, see a person who's going to go after kids after work, they need to be there sharp at a certain time. You know, the kid cannot stay. Now, you know, it often happens that in, you know, when we're at work, it's not like you're sitting there and then you go, okay, now it's 5 o'clock and I'm going to go home. Um, I mean, we don't necessarily do that. We are in the middle of work and we see if, like a little couple of minutes later, if it requires a couple of more minutes, then we are going to give it to them. But a person is going to go after kids. They're not going to have that luxury of even a couple of minutes. They need to be there sharp at that particular time. You know what I mean? So taking all these things into consideration, it's extremely um, valuable, and are the manifestations of our compassion for the people that are working there. You know what I mean? That would be another one. Yeah.
Yeah, these topics of compassion and empathy usually are ones that are contentious because there's a lot of corporations that are struggling with those decisions. Do I let
Yeah.
my people go on a certain time because I know beforehand
Mm.
that they must be somewhere? And a lot of them
Yeah.
choose the financial aspects behind people
Yeah.
leaving at a certain time. Uh, but you bring up a good point that I remember, and especially around DE and I inclusion. I had a gentleman uh, actually say I was the DEI hire, and I remember asking them, if you feel that way, why are you even there? If you feel like it's not because of your talent and things like that. So even DEI, along with compassion and empathy, are misunderstood at times at the corporate level. But what
Yeah.
happens is that the workforce feels it and often sees it when that misunderstanding is in there.
Yes. Yes. That's correct. Yeah. So no. No, so this is another part of the conversation I have in my notes that I think it's very worthy to bring it up, Enrique, which is like when we talk about compassion, it's not just like one way avenue. um, and that's something that, especially from an executive perspective, from a leader's perspective, is extremely important to know that it's not always you, the executive or the organization, needs to serve and be compassionate. Often when you are, um, you develop this culture of compassion at your workplace, then people see that. Many people, like I wouldn't say even most people, but many people see that, and they want to be compassionate in return. Yeah, so there are many times, especially like with the small to medium sized organizations, enterprises. Payroll is a big deal, for example. Many of the services businesses, they go month by month. It's not like they're sitting there with a massive amount of profit. This is a kind of a mispresentations that, some may just look at certain top performing corporations and then go, oh yeah, like obviously these are profitable, et cetera, et cetera. But the most businesses out there, the SMEs, they just go month by month, really. And every month they go through different challenges, like to get the right amount of work, to win the right amount of work, not having people sitting on the bench, especially if there are consulting firm, services firm, that they need to basically do certain amount of work so that they bring a certain amount of revenue. It's not a product business that you have a certain product and then you keep in a scalable manner, you can keep selling it. So the nature of businesses are quite different. Now, so it happens a lot that you may require your team to stay, more than what they basically normally stay at work, and overnight work on something. And um, when, especially when it comes to smaller businesses, there may not be different. I mean, more than one person in a role. So if, for example, that person is not available, it's not like they can go to the second one, yeah. So let's say in a software development team, they may only have like one um, um, back end developer, yeah. So if that person is not available for whatever reason, then they can't go to another person, and things like that. And or sometimes even if they have alternatives, they have different people that are capable of doing certain work, that person is not carrying the knowledge for that particular client or that particular project. So long story short, there are times that you want your people to go way beyond their typical professional agreement and job description. Yeah. And this is a kind of a mutual thing that then you would expect in that kind of a culture, that people on the other end also are being compassionate, and then seeing that, oh, the organization is actually in trouble if, for example, that person who is the only person who can take care of this work, uh doesn't stretch himself or herself. So what I'm trying to say is, um it's not just like one way avenue. You create that culture, you initiate it, and then many people in the organization team, they would reward you back by offering the same quality, like compassion. What do you think about that? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that example because it is true. Uh, in a culture developed where empathy and compassion flows both ways, that's where you really get a lot of great generation of all kinds of things, not only the financials but also in the innovation and freedom of creation and things like that. But I think it requires transparency at a level where that compassion can be applied with a little more thought. You know, what I've seen a
Yeah,
lot of times is, hey, you got to stay or you lose your job. Well, can you be a little more transparent as to why I had to stay?
yeah,
And now there's not a lot of times there's not uh, the avenue to explain everything, but I think
yes.
it's incumbent on the leader to have a level of transparency that you can allow compassion and empathy to be flown, back your way.
Yeah, that is correct. That is correct. Definitely. See, like while I mean, in this almost 30 minutes conversation, we try to discuss the topic as much as we can, but there's way more to this conversation, in a practical sense, if someone, wants to apply that. And there are lots of nuances and everything. So this conversation is to bring it to the attention of our audience, obviously, and then, discuss it a little bit. But so, for example, one concern when it comes to that, and often when we work with the different leaders, is like this kind of balance or integration of um, compassion and accountability. See, so especially nowadays, we see this a lot, that more and more and more expectation is being put on the organizations, from increasing, let's say, here in Australia, like incremental increase of superannuation percentage, which basically the contribution of the organization to people's pay after they get retired. Things like that, all the way to all of these policies are being made to basically to protect the workers and everything. So all of these things are there, and culturally also people are more demanding, and sometimes appropriately demanding, like we're not criticizing that, when they join a organization. Um so so now, at the same time, so we need to understand that, like, not every single part of your problem is going to be taken care of by the organization you work for or you work with. Yeah. So it's not like, okay, so you're going through lots of different personal problems, et cetera, et cetera. But then organization also has its priorities, and it can't be dragged, and can't. So there should be kind of a balance between to what extent we're um, conveying compassion and accountability. And see, this is a very kind of thin line. This is the thing that needs to be negotiated within that culture and dynamic. Yeah, it's not something to You can't come up with a kind of a prescription, or it's not something prescriptive that go, okay, these are the policies, these are the processes, these are the procedures, follow them, and then you're going to have the best culture possible. That's why we don't take that kind of a behavioralist approach in the being discourse in my body of work. We go, no, see, you need to focus on more fundamental qualities, how these individuals are relating to awareness, how these individuals are relating to responsibility, commitment, and now we're talking about compassion. Yeah. And depends on the health of their relationship with how they relate to each and every of them, then you would guess that there is a higher probability that these individuals, whether they're an employer or employee, or you know are they sitting in the executives, tactical, strategic, operational, no matter which layer they're sitting at, they're going to manifest they're going to let that relatively healthy relationship that they have with these aspects of being in their behaviors, in their decisions that they're making. And at the end of the day, the aggregation of these decisions that are being made at any level, and the aggregation of the behaviors being manifested, the actions being taken by various different individuals within our organization, at the end of the day, is going to lead to certain success or failures. That's simply as it is. Now, as I said, like we can't prescribe that, but we can discuss the health of relationship with these aspects of being. Let's say, for example, we're talking about compassion on both ends. Now, and then you guess that there's a much higher probability that um, people know what to do, how to do it, at what time is the right time, and like all those nuances needs to be um, organically built and be put in place, if it makes sense. So therefore, we're having this conversation. We keep um, um, create this team culture discussions, and many of the organizations, they have professional coaches, trained coaches, working with their teams, working with their executives, and the other people in their teams, so that they create this mutual language, so that then they can communicate more effectively, they can generate trust, and indeed facilitates. Once that foundation is created, then that foundation can facilitate many of these various different, more detailed um, nuances. Yeah, so like the conversation with compassion. So, long story short, going back to compassion and accountability, see, it needs to be negotiated. That to what extent you should be expecting the organization to care and be compassionate around your personal problems, and then to what extent you actually need to really care about the organization's priorities, despite the type of personal problems that you're going into. Yeah,
Yeah, it's very important for both parties, right? The
yeah,
employee and the organization to establish this type of rapport. Because even in the realms of empathy, compassion, these are two elements that, when understood and employed correctly, can
mm,
help leaders and workers avoid what we often, term as burnout, exhaustion at work. No one is
yeah,
helping anyone. And it's just like one of those environments where no one, everybody's expecting empathy and compassion, but
yeah,
are not willing to give it. And then everybody loses there, because that's where that workforce is not enabling the
yeah,
organization to succeed financially, and then the organization is not enabling the workers to
yeah.
succeed professionally.
That's the thing. See, I think one of the key things here is, instead of focusing on and that's not human inclination. The human beings inclination, it's like, what's in it for me? We are self-interested beings. But the key to maturity and being polished is, once you are considerate, I mean, once you one while you take your self-interest into consideration, immediately you want to go a little bit beyond the current time and beyond the beyond yourself, yeah, which I call it higher purpose, the quality of higher purpose, going beyond yourself and beyond the current time. And you want to focus on giving first. See, choosing, no matter you're an employer, you're an employee, um, uh, you want to focus on, you want to choose the life of service. And that's an extremely important thing. You go there to serve, and then you find meaning in that service. Now, I think if I'm an employer and I'm constantly focusing on what to receive from the person that I hire, or if I am the employee and I'm mostly concerned with what I can receive from, and on both ends, if you're not first prioritizing giving, so we are expecting the consequences of what has happened yet, in a sense. Yeah, instead of focusing on what to receive in exchange, we want to see what is it there that I'm serving. So now, therefore, if I want the other party to be compassionate towards me, the best quick um, advice that I can give to my experience is in the studies is you initiate it yourself. Yeah, now often we talk to organizations and leaders, so we want them to start be proactive around that. But no matter like which like if you're sitting on this side and that side, there's no harm in initiating that and being proactive around being compassionate and having assertive, direct conversations and setting expectations. And that's what I said, that it's something to be negotiated. Yeah, it needs to be negotiated, and then we need to create that shared reality together. Yeah.
And it truly is a sign on both sides of strength, right? Compassion uh, and 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 empathy are often, defined as weaknesses, but we truly know that it is a sign of strength. Because as you just mentioned, right, our inclination is us first.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
if you are exhibiting these qualities of empathy and compassion, you're
Yeah.
definitely signaling that you are stronger than your inclination for self, and that's a great thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely agree, and that's good that you wrote it up because, yeah, so often being compassionate or being open about being vulnerable and open about the problems we go through, it can actually be the source of, it can cause abuse in a way, or being more susceptible to abuse. Now, and that's why lots of people, they don't want to be open and vulnerable. Uh, but here's the thing: if you are working in a kind of an environment on either side that you cannot be, or you don't feel that you can be open and vulnerable with the leaders you work with, perhaps. Oh, and if you're not mistaken, see, sometimes we have that perception, and that's not real. Yeah, we may feel that I can't be open and vulnerable with the leader I work with, but that can be wrong in a sense. Yeah, it's just like that on the lack of familiarity, you would say. But in case that like you have a congruent understanding, you have a congruent understanding of the fact that like you're working in this environment, the compassion, it's not very compassionate. You cannot be open and vulnerable around your problems and everything. And I mean, perhaps that's not the right place to stay. uh, so you may want to find leaders and organizations or the environment that they value that, because it's not very healthy if you cannot be transparent, open, and vulnerable in an environment and you cannot trust that leader. The same thing goes the other way. If there are people that like you're hiring or that you're in your team that you can see that it's really hard to be vulnerable with them, as if like they have this understanding of a leader being perfect, or they have this understanding of an organization that like everything needs to work like a clock, and therefore um yeah so um if you know that also it's something to be very careful around, that you don't want to have people that you can't be um open and vulnerable with them, or cannot expect their compassion, you know. So these are the things that as we're building the team, we need to be very, very, very careful. See, you don't want all the human beings in the world in your team. You need few people. You need X number of people, and choosing the right people is extremely important. Yeah, and we had series of like 4 episodes in this series that we discussed like the um how to get the right people, what qualities to look into when we're getting the right people on board. Yeah, so compassion also is one of them and is extremely important. Yeah.
Well, we're so glad that you joined us today for this conversation as we discussed empathy and distinction of compassion, some of the benefits of empathy and compassion in leadership, some practical ways to develop empathy and compassion. And we even discussed some real life examples and potential case studies of how these two elements can really make a difference in your organization. And we discuss some of the challenges and misconceptions of and around empathy and compassion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Enrique, and thank you very much, everyone.